Hey everybody, welcome. Glad you could make it. So this isn't Ask Me Anything. Everything is fair game. Feel free to ask whatever kind of things you are curious about. I'm trying to do something I haven't done before, which is use the Q&A app, which is built into this Hangout. So if you can throw your questions in there, that would be awesome. If for whatever reason that's not working for you, feel free to throw them in the chat. And as soon as questions start coming in, I will answer them for you. Otherwise, it's just going to be me kind of sitting here and you can watch me, which doesn't sound as fun. So ask questions. Promise to be nice. Dave Moore asks, how's the weather in Boston? Weather in Boston, actually right now is, well, it's pretty cold, obviously. We are under an incredible amount of snow at the moment. The snow banks are roughly at like chest to head height for me, which is like almost 6 feet. So getting around as a pedestrian has been a little bit harrowing. Actually, a lot of people are walking in the roads, as you might expect. But we're doing all right. It's sunny at least. Nothing's melting, but at least there's vitamin D coming in. Elijah, how's it going, man? Your question is it working? It is. I see your questions, and I'm answering them. So hit me with something tougher. Give me your best shot. Again, if you've just joined, please submit questions using the Q&A app in Google Hangouts. It's on, for me, at least it's on the left of the screen. It says Q&A. Click on there, fire me a question, and I will do my best to answer it. Question about Pry when it came out, and do we use it? I guess I do use it by virtue of it's included in most of my projects. I've sort of been like a Ruby debugger, whatever the default debugger person for a while. Pry to me doesn't offer a lot, I guess, except for pretty printing. I find the pretty printing kind of nice. I don't tend to use it for the things like CDing into an object or things like that. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen anything from Pry that's like blown me away. Like, oh man, that's so good. I have to do that. And so I've mostly just kind of stuck with my current workflow. But I'm ending up to using Pry. I've ended up using Pry because other people are just sort of throwing it in projects, and I'm fine with that. Question from Frank. How do you see our growth? How does thoughtbot plan to grow it? I'm actually not clear if you see questions or not, or if I need to read them. Maybe someone can include that in their question, whether or not you can see them before I read them. That would be helpful. So how do I see the community growing, and how do we plan to grow it? How do I see it growing? I see it growing a lot. I think we're still very much on the upswing in terms of people coming into Ruby, people coming into Rails. Demand to me, particularly for experienced Rails developers, still seems kind of crazy, off the charts. I remember, I think it was last year or the year before, the job board at RailsConf had so many things put on it that it fell over. It fell down. So I think demand is still strong. I don't know if we're explicitly planning, if thoughtbot is planning to grow it. I think it's growing all by itself. I think we're going to keep doing what we've always done, which is try to teach and try to be helpful and try to set a good example and care about code quality and culture and sustainable pace and all the things that we've always cared about, and hope that resonates with people and rubs off as much as possible. Good questions. Keep them coming. If you just arrived, submit questions with the Q&A app on the left side, if you will, please. How far along do you think you can get as a self-taught programmer? I work at a company where I've had a lot of opportunity to learn and develop several Rails apps that have worked well, but I can't help but think I'm missing out by not having a mentor. I agree with you. You are missing out by not having a mentor. I don't think there's any way to improve as quickly or as thoroughly as working underneath someone who's more experienced. This apprenticeship model has been around for hundreds of years. It goes way, outside programming, and I think that's because it's a really great way to learn. And I think it's hard to do. I don't know of anything that's as good as it. I think the best thing you can do if you're somewhere where you are the strongest programmer on the team or the only programmer on the team, I think for a lot of people, the best option at that point is to find a better team. If you can't hire someone in above you, then you might have to go find somewhere else to work. You may have to relocate geographically. You may have to try to a remote team that has good people. But I just think there's no substitute for particularly pairing with better people, getting code review from better people. There's a fair amount you can do on your own. Upcase is one example. Self-study is, sort of the next best thing, I think, if you're willing to put the time in. But beyond that, it's tough to beat. Bruce is saying, we can read other questions, but I guess you're saying, yes, we can read other questions. You can read the questions, so that's good. So, Dave, what do I think set up a mid-level developer apart from a junior level? We can see the questions. Awesome, thank you, that's helpful. Glad to hear it. What do I think sets apart a mid-level developer from a junior? I don't know if it's any one particular thing. I think it's a combination of so many things that I'm not sure it makes sense to pull them apart. It's like, what makes a good singer versus a decent singer? Why is someone great to listen to or great to work with or things like that? If I'm gonna kind of rephrase the question and say, what would you focus on if you were a junior developer and you wanted to get to mid-level? Getting back to what I said before, I think the best thing you can do is work with better people. And working is ideal because you do it so many hours a week, right? So like full-time work with more experienced people is awesome. If you can't swing that, at least get some more experienced friends. So look for a Ruby group in your area, go there, ask for code reviews, be a little bit annoying, honestly. I think you gotta have a little bit of impetuousness to you when you're new, because you don't bring a lot to the table exactly. Like you can't go to someone more experienced and be like, hey, would you mind reviewing my code because then I'll do X for you. It's sort of like there's an implied imbalance there, but I think that's okay. I think you just have to kind of get over that and realize that you need to pester just a little bit, because the people that are more experienced had this done for them, right? They got mentoring from other people almost certainly, and I think that we should encourage this feeling in our community of a willingness to mentor people that are newer. This is actually something. So there's the game of Go that I have played a fair amount in my life, and there's this really strong mentoring culture in Go where it's sort of considered part of the game is to teach it to newer players and to play games with them. And I feel like that's somewhat present in programming as well, and I think we should keep that going. So don't be shy about seeking out people that can help you. That was a wandery answer, but I think we touched on most of what I had to say on that, Dave. So, these are you can upvote these questions, and they're getting ranked by upvotes. This is wonderful. Good job, Google. Okay, I just watched your Vim talk. How do I differentiate between the different levels of Vimmers? Again, I'm not sure that it matters. I think, so I'm going to rephrase your question for you into a question I'd rather answer because I'm like a politician. What do you focus on to move between the levels? In Vim, I think the most important thing is realizing that using Vim is sort of in a process of accretion. It's a process of slowly learning more and more, and always continuing to sort of up your game. So I guess it's sort of a continuous improvement thing. And the tool I use for that, I have a couple tricks for that. One is you sort of just need to develop this mentality of there must be a better way. You need to be sort of extremely intolerant of extra typing. Just when you find yourself repeating something, or when you find yourself using a lot of keystrokes to get something done, think to yourself, I gotta spend some time researching this and finding a better way. For me, one thing I do is I keep what I call a tool sharpening list. And so I have a shortcut in Vim, or a set of leader commands in Vim that open up a file for me. And I dump things in there when I notice that they're annoying to work on. Like, I gotta find a quicker way to get to my schema RB. Or I find myself always wanting to split a model over here and tests over here. Let me make a thing to make that faster. And that lets me record the fact that there's something annoying about my environment, but it makes it so that I don't have to fix it right away and interrupt my flow. And then I'll spend time in the mornings improving, like pulling one of those things off the list and improving it. And I did this very aggressively when I first started programming in particular, and I was getting into Vim. And I would just spend every morning, I would spend about 15 minutes pulling something off the tool sharpening list, fixing something about my environment, and it just made such a huge difference. It's one of those things that it made it more fun to work. It made me appreciate working more. So that I can't that habit and that sort of daily improvement habit, nothing is more powerful than daily effort. If you can spend a little bit of time on anything every day, you're just going to get so much better at it so fast. It compounds so strongly. Boo, boo, boo. Hey, Bruce. Our Angular and Backbone, useful tools. Yes. We David asked me this question about a year and a half ago, or maybe even a little bit longer, maybe 2 years ago. We were working on like 5 Backbone apps at the time. Like every team was working on a Backbone app. We've sort of gotten away from that. I think we found that there isn't quite enough structure in Backbone for us. Backbone has a lot of freedom, a lot of sort of, figure it out for yourself. And we're not huge fans of that sometimes. We have a couple of Angular projects. We have a couple of Ember projects. We've built some internal tools in Ember. They definitely mesh well with Rails. We think, Ember on the front and Rails on the back end is a totally legitimate way to structure an app. It's not my favorite thing in the world because I'm not a huge JavaScript fan, but our recent app form keep is built like this, Ember front and Rails back end. And as far as I know, they've been very happy with how those things have worked together. What is my opinion about testing JavaScript? I'm not a huge fan of JavaScript in general. I like, if I had to write a heavy front-end app these days, honestly, I would use probably ClojureScript and use Ohm and React and things like that. I'm not a huge fan of pure JavaScript or even CoffeeScript, which I consider basically the same thing. So I'm sort of not the guy to answer this question, unfortunately. This would be a good forum question. I'm sure there are people with more JavaScript experience out there than I. In fact, there certainly are. And even if you don't get a good response from other subscribers, I can pull in a couple thoughtbotters and say, like, what are we doing on these heavier JavaScript apps? And get you an answer to that one. But my opinion on testing in general is you should do it. So, yeah. Do I have experience using a mechanical keyboard? Nearly buying one. I wouldn't buy a mechanical keyboard for the productivity increase. If anything, it's going to decrease the productivity of those around you because it's so loud. I think if you're not sure if it's worth the money, it's probably not. If you are having some RSI and you want to buy a keyboard that you think will help with that, I think that's a great idea. RSI being repetitive stress, something like carpal tunnel, or like pain in your hands, things like that. I was having that a couple years ago, and I bought a Kinesis Advantage, a Pro Advantage keyboard, which is a split thing. It has sort of keys in a sort of a cup sort of shape, which is interesting. It's like a bowl. Imagine like the keys are sort of in a bowl for each hand. So your fingers can kind of extend down on the home row. Kind of hard to explain, but you can Google this thing. I love my Kinesis keyboard. It was like $130 or something, but I expensed it. I think you can and should expense things like that to your company. These are great. Keep them coming. Hit me with these Q&A questions. If you just joined, please submit questions using the Q&A tool, and I will pull them off. Fixed cost quotation. Yeah. Mindset of fixed cost quotations. So my thoughts on that are fixed bid projects almost always are bad for one party or the other, right? Either you have padded it so much that the project took you, less time than you said it would, and you've sort of made out, and the client maybe feels like they didn't quite get their value, or you've screwed up and you've underestimated, which is probably is very easy to do, and then you resent the client as you're working, vastly beyond your original time estimate. We don't do any fixed cost stuff at thoughtbot. I guess we do like we'll do like a 1 week design sprint for a fixed cost, but that's sort of a very, very time boxed and limited scope engagement. But we would never be like, yeah, we're going to build your MVP and we'll do it for N dollars. We give an estimate. We say we think it's going to take this many people, roughly this many weeks, and it might be and we'll often give a range. So we think it'll take 10 to 14 weeks. You can expect to spend something in here most likely. But fixed bid, I think, is just one of those situations where you're doomed for one of you to resent the other, or possibly both. And I think a lot of that just comes down to educating your client and telling them why this is a good idea. Brennan Dunn has a lot of amazing stuff about talking about value versus focusing on cost and focusing on cost structure. So go check out Brennan Dunn's BRENNANDUNN stuff. Quality, he has a lot of writing on that. I like this question, Stu. By the way, hi, Stu. Who mentors me? I make my coworkers mentor me, more or less. I've been sort of slowly copying Joe Ferris's brain. Joe Ferris is the CTO of thoughtbot. I sort of just lean on other people at thoughtbot who have skills in areas that I want. I don't have like a formal mentor arrangement with anybody, and I actually think that's sort of a weakness of my life right now. That's something that I'd like to change, actually. I learn a lot from people I interview on the podcast. That's another thing. But I think there actually would be nice for me to have a defined, explicit thing. I think I'm lacking that to my detriment. I'm not sure what I would bring to the table even then. Maybe mentorships are sort of always asymmetrical, and maybe that's just okay. Maybe I just try to be as nice as possible, and they like me because I'm a nice guy. Good question. Oh yeah, I like this question. What do you think about React.js? I'm a huge fan. I think the model is really promising and really awesome. I've been writing some ClojureScript, and there's a library called Ohm, which is basically a wrapper around React. React gets even better when you're working with immutable data structures. Like a lot of things, immutable data structures are kind of awesome. If I were going to work on a app that, like a heavy front-end app, I would want to write it in ClojureScript, and I would want to use Ohm with React behind that. Very much worth learning, very much worth looking into and experimenting yourself. I think we are seeing a new architecture. Well, not exactly new, but a new to us, new to this world way of building apps that I would be shocked if it was not more or less the default pretty soon. Talking about JavaScript, I'm gonna get myself in so much trouble. I'm gonna watch this in a couple of years and be so embarrassed. I'm a little bit out of my element in JavaScript world. Do I use Meteor at all? If so, you'd love to hear my thoughts on it for small to big apps. Haven't used it. Nothing to offer there, unfortunately. Picking questions here. Grab this one. Hey, Paul. What was my introduction to functional programming? What was my introduction to functional programming? I took a scheme class in college, but I mean, I can't really count that. I guess that's the first time I saw functional programming, but I didn't really know which way it was up in a lot of ways at the time. So I'm not sure I'd count that. I guess I got mostly exposed to it through Clojure. So I started learning Clojure a couple of years ago and have written some things with it since then. Some ClojureScript as well. ClojureScript, by the way, is a Lisp that compiles into JavaScript. Clojure is the same Lisp that compiles into JVM bytecode. So I guess my introduction was Clojure, which was a great introduction. I liked it a lot. Given my experience, what is my decision-making process for selecting functional versus imperative programming for solving problems? My Ruby actually looks very functional. I lean on functional constructs a lot. I think I'm just a huge fan of that model of expressing computation. Like I find that when I start thinking about a problem, when I figure out, oh, you know what, I can actually express this in terms of like map and reduce, for example, the code just gets so much cleaner. I've often like written a bunch of code and then realized like, oh my God, we're just actually mapping these things and then we're combining all these things into this final result. And when I realize that there are these functional components to what I'm doing and rewrite it in that functional style, it's so much nicer, so much cleaner. I'm a huge fan of that paradigm in general, and I'm actually looking to write more functional code in the future. Haskell, yes, Elm, Clojure, things like that. I'm totally into this model, more so than OO, honestly. After a long time of doing OO, And one of the things that sort of hammered this home for me was I just spent a month at the Turing School in Denver teaching new Ruby programmers and just new programmers period. And figuring out how to model things in an OO way is so hard for beginners. They struggle with it so much, and I still struggle with it. It's still hard to figure out like what classes should be there, what abstractions should you build. And one of the things I see is that beginners start off by wanting to just write functions. They want to write a bunch of class methods, which are effectively functions, and express their problem as a series of transformations of data. And that's functional programming. And like their sort of natural, intuitive way of doing this matches up so well with this model, but not so well with OO. And it makes me think maybe OO is actually the problem here. Maybe it's not that you're new. Maybe this is a more natural way of thinking about these things. I like this question. Do I refactor my vimRC? No, I don't really refactor it. Some people, Chris Toomey, for example, at thoughtbot kind of takes vimRCs about as far as you can go. He split his vimRC into by topic. He's basically done extract class on vimRC, so he loads sources a bunch of other sub vimRCs from his parent vimRC. So if you want to go see what that looks like when you take it to the edge, go look at Chris Toomey's stuff. I think he's C Toomey, Toomey on GitHub, I believe. I'm sure there's a ton of awesome stuff in his dot files in general that you should steal. My vimRC is a little bit sloppy, but it works okay. Are you going to include any Golang videos on the weekly iteration? We certainly could. I'm going to give you a kind of a lame answer. I'm not super excited about Go personally, so the impetus to do it wouldn't come from me. If there are a bunch of people that are interested in it, we'll make it happen, and I'll find someone inside thoughtbot that's really interested in it and have them lead those. I'm more interested in going higher level. Go to me, if you start at Ruby, Go to me is lower level abstraction. I want to be up. I actually want to be here, honestly. So I don't have a ton of personal interest, and I don't think there's a ton of interest in the Boston office, but I think we could make that happen with there's a lot of SF folks. A lot of people in San Francisco are really into Go, and so we could bring in some external internal experts and get you some of that if you want it. So if you want it, if you want to petition for more Go stuff, post it on the forum, a request, and so is anybody else interested in Go, and see if you can get a group together that will convince me that there are enough people that want to learn it that we should do that. That's a good question. When I'm pairing with someone who doesn't know Vim, what's my second favorite editor? My second favorite editor is Emacs. I think Emacs is also an awesome editor. After that, it falls off quickly. I guess my third favorite would be maybe Lighttable. But basically, any pairing with someone who doesn't know Vim, I guess So the nice thing about Vim is you can just hit I and then tell people you're in a normal editor, right? You can use the arrow keys. You can type whatever you want. You teach them how to save and teach them how to get back into insert mode. And they basically only need to know 2 commands. Here's how you write and here's how you enter insert mode. So 3 commands. You have to exit insert mode as well. So if I were working with someone who had no idea how to use Vim, I would basically have them do that. And also I would evangelize at them until they basically hated me and Vim, because I'm very annoying that way. How do one get the most out of a mentor? I think ideally you would get them to pair with you remotely, or ideally in person, but remotely is fine. I think that would be most effective. Let's build I'm working on a thing. Can you help me can we spend an hour or 2 hours working on this thing together? I think that's best because next best I would say is code review. So let's say you just did code review. You show them what the code you've written, and they can offer some insight. And I think that's super valuable. That's still really good. But what you won't learn is how they would have approached it in the first place and how they use their tools. I've learned a ton by pairing with people, not just about programming, but about the tools they use. Oh, you're using this thing, this AG thing. What is that? Oh, it's like grep, but it's different this way. Or how do you find the call style everywhere where this method is called? How do we fix a Git issue that we had? How do we accidentally included this thing in the index? How do we get it out? Shell commands, shortcuts, Vim leader commands, plugins you're not aware of. There's just so many things that you can learn in addition to just how to write good code, when you pair with someone, that I think you can't really beat it. Second best is have them review some code. Third best is just throw questions at them, I guess, when you need it. Like worst of all would be like, I'm having this error and I can't figure it out. Try not to do that sort of thing. Use the Googles. Much of a recent client project interacting with an external API. I'm realizing that we're recording this, but the questions will probably not show up in the video. So maybe I should read them anyway. Much of a recent client project involved interacting with an external API. I was torn between mocking out the requests beyond the point I was happy with, or creating a fake version of the API in its entirety. Which would you pick and why? That's a great question. And there's not an awesome answer to it. I think I would need to do some thinking about exactly the pros and cons, but let's see if we can do it on the fly. Mocking out the requests versus creating fakes. So I've done both. If you look in the Upcase repo, we have fakes for things like Stripe, and I think we also have a fake GitHub, and maybe even some other things like that. Fakes are nice because you can reuse them. So we actually have a fake Stripe gem that we use, and we've extracted it from projects. And so once you write the fake Stripe, you can just keep reusing it here and there, which is nice. Mocking out the requests. Mocking out the request can be great because it's sort of targeted. So if we pull in fake Stripe mocks out like 20 different endpoints with different responses, and has some moving pieces to it. You need to spin it up in a different thread. I think when the tests are running, there's some complications there. Mocking out the request is something you can do like right from in the test case. And I think it becomes clear, like, okay, I mock out the API in this way, and then I exercise my app in this way, and I expect these results. And it's nice to have all that information right in the test case. It means the test case is self-contained. I can sort of read it from top to bottom and see what's going on and relate the inputs to the outputs. When you spin up a fake, you often have to go source diving into the fake to figure out what's going on there. So there's pros and cons. I'm sure I could enumerate more if I had a little more time, but that's sort of the gist of it. One thing I'd recommend is just trying things. Like try an experiment. We're like, okay, I've been mocking these things out. I'm gonna try to write a fake for this service. Shoot for services that are kind of small. Stripe is actually kind of a large thing to fake out. So maybe try to like write a fake that for a service that only has like 1 or 2 endpoints, and see what you think. Pay attention. Like, does this feel better overall as I've worked on this project than when I was mocking them in place? And sort of come up with your own opinions and thoughts on that. So I think it's the best way to approach these sort of there are pros and cons situations in general, is give them a try and pay attention. I like this question. What's the biggest challenge with Upcase? What's the biggest challenge? There are a couple. One is that it's sort of a service that people cancel if they're not using it. It's one of those things that requires time. So the most common cancellation reason by far on Upcase is I don't have time anymore. People will like, I took another job, or I'm starting a family, or I have to move, or I didn't have as much time as I thought I would. And that's hard for us to deal with because like people often say like the content's good, but I didn't quite have time to get through it. And so ideally we want to build a service that people want to stay subscribed to for a long time. From the business side of things, clearly that's beneficial to us. But what we're finding is it's tough for people to have the time that they want to get enough value from it for them to stay subscribed for a long period of time. And so that's something I've been thinking a lot, is like, are there things that we can do that would give people value and make it feel worth it? Yes, I'm totally getting great value from this thing without a huge time commitment. Or is like the I don't have time thing like just a sort of generic excuse? And in fact, it's more like we're not providing enough value. Like, should we listen to that like I don't have time thing, or is it really more like you weren't good enough for me to dedicate the time? So sort of, I think answering that question is kind of huge for us, which is sort of a big challenge. The other challenge is the other challenge is that I haven't done a ton of exercises to learn things. So one of the ways that we teach on Upcase is by building exercises and watching videos. My personal learning style tends to be more project oriented. So I like to start with exercises. Like when I was learning Clojure, I did a bunch of Clojure problems, and I watched some videos and I read some things. And then I was like, okay, now I want to do a project. And I started building things in Clojure. And so I don't think we quite have an analog for that in Upcase. We don't, and I'm not sure how that would work. And so I struggle with that mentally. Like, how can we give sort of same benefit to people in a way that scales and that makes sense? And that's something I'd love for us to get better at. How would I remote pair program? Carefully. No, I've used teammate.io. That's great. I've used Screen Hero. You can Google this. This is actually I wouldn't say a solved problem, but there's a lot of good options out there. Screen Hero and Teammate, I think, are both great. Give them a try, and it works pretty well. Hey, Dolph, how's it going? Kent Beck tweeted something strangely beautiful today. Quote, "The craft of programming begins with empathy, not formatting or languages or tools or algorithms or data structures." Do I agree? If you had to replace empathy with any word, what would it be? Interesting. Multi-layers here. The craft of programming begins with empathy. The craft of programming begins with empathy. I'm not 100% sure what he's saying there, I guess. I think he's saying that, I imagine that's empathy for your reader. It's empathy for other people that are going to work on your code, or maybe empathy for the people that are going to use your code. If he's saying that, then I guess I agree. I think that mentality of how do I make this easy to read and change and reason about and great for people to use, I guess that's the most important overarching goal. And so I guess I could be into that. Certainly more than formatting or tools or algorithms at first, at least. If I had to replace empathy with any word, what would it be? The craft of programming begins with excitement, maybe. Hopefully you like what you're doing. Maybe the craft of programming begins with passion, I might say, honestly. I don't think there's any replacement for really liking and caring. I guess caring more than liking, caring about what you're doing. If you are not passionate about writing good code and making a good thing and getting better, you are just never going to get better or make great things. I think someone that's passionate and not super skilled will pass someone who's only kind of passionate and more skilled at 100 miles an hour, and it's not going to take very long. So I think, yeah, I'm going to go with passion. Closure question. Oh, yeah. Have you done much production work in Closure? What sort of problems would cause you to reach for Closure rather than Ruby? I have written one, I guess. Yeah, I guess I've written one or two production Closure things. I haven't built anything huge. Well, production's sort of a strong word for some of the stuff I've done. I guess it depends on how you define production. No one is making money off Closure code I've written, which I think is like a decent benchmark. I have written some things that I use to learn the language. So I wrote a maze generator and solver. It generates random mazes and then solves it. I wrote a game of life. I've written a web app. I've written some like scrapers. Like go download, go to this API, grab all these things, download all these things, make some requests. So not much production work. What sort of problems would cause you to reach for Closure rather than Ruby? Honestly, at this point, this is gonna sound bad, but like I'm a little bit bored with Ruby. I've been writing Ruby I wrote my first Ruby like 10 or 11 years ago, and I hope that we have not reached programming language nirvana, where programming languages will never get better again. So I believe actually firmly that we haven't. And so if we haven't, that must mean that new, better things are out there or will be soon. And so I want to make sure I'm aware of them and experimenting with them. And so I continue to write Closure and ClojureScript and learning Haskell and looking at things like Elm. So the sort of problems that would cause me to reach for these languages are any of the problems that I've had. And I'm trying to write all my new personal code in Closure to get more experience with it. So I would it's a general purpose programming language. So any problem really. But if you wanted a really good reason to like tell your boss, hey, we should write this next thing in Closure, I would say if you need to do concurrency, Closure has some awesome tools for that. Like if you we got a ton of data to go through. We really need this to run on all 30 cores. Closure is a nice choice for that. Oh. Has your team worked on projects where you choose a document/NoSQL database such as MongoDB over a relational database like Postgres? If so, what type of requirements would push you towards a document database? That's a good question. I have never personally worked on an app where we were using a document or NoSQL database, but I've heard nothing but horror stories from other thoughtbotters about using specifically Mongo. So I would be very gun shy about that. No personal experience, but the word on the street is stay away from that. Your mileage will certainly vary. I don't have an answer for what type of requirements would push me there because sort of nothing right now. Let's grab this one. You are now a fresh junior developer working with little mentorship or support. Task. And you have this task. App A is currently being built and you have sole responsibility to integrate testing. To integrate testing. What resources would you use to jump and start your testing fundamentals? Well, app A is being built and you have sole responsibility to integrate testing. Well, you're kind of screwed. Testing is like love. Like I'm dating this person. Well, no, testing is not like love. God, I need an editor. We're gonna have to edit this before this goes out. Integrating testing is not something that happens like, oh, and your job, Andrew, is to integrate testing, and the rest of us will be writing untested code over here. You're screwed if that's the case, especially if you're new. You have been given a terrible, terrible assignment. Testing is a cultural thing. Testing has to be something that your team believes in and believes is worth the effort. They should believe it. I think it is. If they don't, you should get it. But your job as like a new person to convince your team testing is worthwhile, or to be the only person over there writing tests, you have kind of no hope of success, I think, honestly. Given that, that helpful start, what resource would I use to jumpstart my testing fundamentals? The test-driven Rails video tutorial on Upcase is really solid. I think it's really good. Josh Clayton did it. I think he did an awesome job. Assuming you're talking about Rails, yeah, you said app. I'm gonna assume that means Rails app. So I would start there. Ask questions on the forum if you get stuck, which you will because testing is hard. But I would start that workshop, and man, good luck to you. Because again, it's a cultural thing. It's not something that someone can be responsible for. You're the testing guy. It's not going to work. How did you handle? How do I handle real-time components in Rails? Like a real-time dashboard that updates as orders come in. WebSockets, Action Controller Live, some JavaScript API. Do you think it's a bad idea to try real-time with Rails Ruby? This isn't super in my comfort zone, in my bailiwick. I'm not like super strong on this. I believe like we've done things with WebSockets and that seemed to work pretty well. We've done a little bit of work with WebSockets. Beyond that, I haven't tried Action Controller Live, JavaScript API. Generally not a huge fan of that. Do I think it's a bad idea to try real time? I think I'd be out of my element saying yes or no on that. Sorry. Wish I had more information for you. That'd be a good forum question. We can find someone that has a good answer. From Abby Zhang. This is fair. Could you give some actual reasons why MongoDB is very bad? No. Well, yes. Yes and no. Again, this is all hearsay. This is not from me personally. This is what coworkers who have experience have told me. Someone talked about losing data. Someone else, not a big fan of the API. Was that what it was? I think it was sort of this general idea that like, look, your data actually always has a schema, and so pretending it doesn't have a schema sort of leads to pain. Like there always actually is sort of a schema, even if it's implicit. So I mean, it's sort of, I guess it's kind of lame for me to talk trash about MongoDB, but sort of with that caveat that I personally don't have the experience there. It's just hearsay. So take it with a enormous block of salt and form your own opinions. This is such a fair question. I don't have a good answer to it. What's the biggest scalability problem that you've run into, and how did I tackle solving it? I don't deal with a ton of this, actually. I haven't worked on something that's that huge, that's doing a ton of processing, a ton of data. There are 1,000 people or so on Upcase right now, which is like hasn't caused many performance problems for us. But my general approach to dealing with performance problems is sort of always the same, which is profile it, get some numbers on it, prove that it's slow, find out where it's slow, tackle that part, and then measure basically measure everything. Measure before, measure after. Make sure you actually prove that you fixed it. General approach. We do have an improving Rails performance video by Joe where he goes into more detail with that, using specifically New Relic for that part of give me numbers, make sure let's see where the problem is and let's see how we fix it. So that's worth watching. Really enjoying this AMA. Is this a one-off thing, or are there plans to make this a regular, either with yourself or other thoughtbotters? I am also really enjoying this AMA. I'm glad you are too. Is this a one-off thing? It's not. I think like there are 24 people here. I'm getting tons of great questions. If this trend continues, I'd like to make it a regular thing. I'm happy to make myself available for this, and also I'd like to get in more people besides myself. I think it would be great to have Joe join. Also, possibly a JavaScript representative. I know there's a ton of JavaScript being written in the world, and a great person to ask about it. So it'd be nice to have like not exactly a panel, but maybe let's say max 2 people to answer those questions, sort of give you a broader base of experience. So yeah, if this sort of interest continues, I'm happy to keep doing it. I want to make things and do things that you all like and are useful. So if you like it and it's useful, yeah, we'll keep doing it. And we can make it even better by having it not just be the Den show. That's a great question. How long do your test suites, Stu, you're on fire. How long do your test suites take to run? How often do you run the whole suite? Test suites, like the upcase test suite, I think is like 37 seconds, 40 seconds, something like that. I run the whole suite always before I push to master. I run the whole suite before I submit a pull request. And probably a handful of times while I'm working on a feature branch. I run individual tests all the time, constantly, hundreds of times a day. I think our test suite is reasonably quick, and they tend to stay reasonably quick because we do things like try to avoid the database when possible. I try to not create things if I can just build things. I try to use, we do a lot of isolation, so we'll stub out dependencies, which tends to make things faster. And also, we believe in sort of a testing pyramid where unit tests are at the bottom. Like the big base of the app is mostly unit tests, and then integration tests are sort of at the top, because integration tests are nice and give you some good coverage and some good information, but they're slow. So we try to sort of do the bulk of our testing at the unit level, which tends to be fast. And I think that tends to result in like fairly decent test suite speed. How does thoughtbot handle the development/DevOps side of their projects? Or do you exclusively rely on Heroku for everything? For everything that we make internally, we rely on Heroku. We do work on with some clients who don't use Heroku, but I'd say it's not a super good strength of ours. Well, it's certainly not a strength of mine. We have some people that are much better at this than I am, fortunately. But we lean on Heroku pretty heavily. I'm just a huge fan. Like we are expert software developers. Maybe some of us are expert DevOps people, but probably more like decent DevOps people. So we prefer to sort of focus on what we're really good at and stick with Heroku. Question. Do you think that having all your development environment on a remote server and work over SSH like DigitalOcean is a good idea? I don't do that personally. It sounds kind of suspect. I'm not sure how it would. I'm not sure why you would do that exactly. I guess if you had a lot of issues where your production environment was really different than your local environment, and you were pushing bugs into production because you couldn't tell that they were bugs, that might be a good argument for doing something like that. Or if your development environment was really complicated, and so you wanted to be able to create a chef script or something to sort of spin up new instances of it or something like that. I guess that could be a good reason, but to me, I really like having things local. Like it's fast, and I have a UI when I want it. I have a terminal when I want it. So you'd have to kind of give me a really good reason to do that personally. Do I have an opinion on CanCan versus Pundit? I feel past a certain number of roles, Pundit would be a better choice. Don't have a lot of personal experience, but I have just actually, hey, audio's back. Thank you, Dave. Everybody, it says audio is returned. Hooray. I'm excited. Thank you for letting me know. Yes, Tom. I don't have personal experience on this one, but just in the other day in the chat room, in our Slack room, a thoughtbot, people were extolling the virtues of Pundit. People were all into it. And so the word on the street is they like it. So go for it. All good. Hooray. Everyone can hear. All right, you can stop telling me that you can hear me. I got you. Glad. Cool. Oh, here we go. A question, a real one from Bruce. Do you use Guard and Spring to speed up and automate tests? If not, are there alternatives you recommend? Yes. I do use Spring to speed up tests. I love Spring. It works great. It's a good thing. Bring it into your life. Every once in a while, the only downside about Spring, well, yeah, the only downside outside of Spring that I've run into is that it makes you, for a while, sort of like wary that it hasn't reloaded. So like if you change an initializer, it needs to reload itself. You might, I guess it's possible to sort of get yourself in a state where your code works, but Spring has not reloaded when it should. Therefore, you're getting errors in your tests that are out of date because it's using the old pre-booted Spring app. And so part of my debugging process now is like, this seems weird. Let me stop Spring and just make sure it's not that. And that's annoying that that's part of my process. But other than that, like the total net speed up of Spring for me has been huge. Big fan of that. And like it speeds up, booting a console and booting the server and all that stuff. So it's as someone who really appreciates speed, I'm a huge fan. That's a great question. Do you have any tips for building complex or nested forms in Rails with reusable components? What do you think about form objects? If you like them, which library would you suggest? Yes, I'm a huge fan of form objects. I think form objects are almost always a better choice than accepts nested attributes. We've had nothing but pain with that. And form objects are sort of a nice object-oriented way of dealing with this. I think we did recently a weekly iteration on form objects with Gabe. So I would look up for that and see what they said. I don't think we generally use a library for this. I think we sort of just implement them ourselves. It's not a ton of work. I also think there is a post or two on our blog about using form objects. But you should be able to find some good resources about that. But yes, +1 fan of them. Abby, you asked a question about Neo4j, but I don't have any experience with that. Sorry. Am I going to RailsConf? Can I buy you a beer? I'm not sure. I was thinking about it. I'm sort of 50-50. I may go, I may not. If so, you may certainly purchase me a beverage, and I will accept. So one of the questions that I answered during the mic blackout was Stu's question about what part of the style guide bugs me the most. None of it really bugs me. I'm pretty much okay with it. I like using single quotes around strings just because it's easier to type, but it's not a huge thing. For me, I don't get super into style questions. I don't care about that much. I think it's worth having a consensus and having a consistent code base as a worthy goal. But I consider most style questions sort of a bike sheddy argument where it's fun to argue at lunch and develop strong opinions, but when it's time to actually do work, it kind of doesn't really matter. When working on an app that has an orchestration area that provides products and ordering for a company, however, has 3 separate methods of ordering, 2 of these are through separate storefronts, 1 is through the main app itself, how would I structure it? Man, that's like, what kind of house should I buy? I think this is much too complicated for me to give you good advice based on just sort of reading a high-level description of what's going on. But if you wanted to do a more detailed post in the forum, I'll take a look, and you may get some other good advice from other people too. But just talk about, this is not nearly enough information for me to give you good information. You would probably need to write another 400 words before I could start to give you good advice. What have you tried already? How is it working? Is it working well? What are your pay points if it is not working well? What do you anticipate the change in the future will be like? And at the end of the day, questions like this, often the result, I often will just tell people, just try it. Try a thing and see what happens, and then see what sucks, and then try to fix that. It's really hard to predict the best way to build things. So try to build them the best way you can. Make them as simple as you can. Try to do less whenever possible, and just sort of bump into problems and fix them on the fly. I like this question. Any tips for becoming a healthier programmer for those of us who stare at the screen for a little too long, sleep too little, and eat too much junk? Well, I think you developed a sort of nice prescription for yourself right there. Stare at the screen less, sleep more, eat less junk. No. What has worked for me? It's one of those things where like it's not a hard process to become healthier in terms of, it's not a complicated process, but it is harder because habits are tough things to build. There's a great book called The Power of Habit. I would start by reading that and try to build yourself, or just Google tiny habits. I think there's an awesome thing called Tiny Habits from a behavioral researcher at Stanford that talks about try to build yourself little healthy habits. I think if you say, you know, starting tomorrow, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week and I'm going to bring my lunch every day and whatever. Those are things that are tough to stick to and unlikely to remain, but building very small micro habits that make you steadily healthier is probably a approachable idea. Also, get yourself a standing desk. Standing desks are great. I wouldn't work somewhere that would not buy me a standing desk, by the way. If they tell you no, then go somewhere else. The job market is too good to work for a place that doesn't value your health. Opinions on service-oriented architecture and or using microservices? That's not a question. Can an app get too big, or is it more about scalability? I'm sort of dealing with this right now. So Upcase there's 2 main apps. One handles everything except for the exercise reviews, and basically everything except for the exercises is in one app. We decided to, when we were adding these sort of peer-reviewed exercises that had a bunch of Git functionality and all this, and a review system, we decided we would build it in a new app. And what we're learning is we sort of accidentally built it in like a application-based architecture, like a federated app architecture, as opposed to a service-oriented architecture. And what we're determining now is like we actually want to share data between these things, and it's kind of hairy, and we haven't actually drawn the lines very well. It turns out like this app actually wants some of the data this app has, and vice versa. And maybe we didn't do the handoff super well. So my opinion so far is it's hard. It's hard to determine how to do it. So far, one of the things we've learned is don't just think about making another app, thinking about what's a service that we can build that's agnostic enough and holds all the data that it's going to need, and that we can sort of let the other app forget about it, and hopefully that the other app won't want that data. But yeah, so my takeaway so far is it's tricky. I think there's some advantages to the monorail. If I could merge those 2 apps that we have together right now, I think I would. Can an app get too big? Yeah, I think an app can get too big. Yeah, so be careful. Don't let it get too big. This is interesting. What are the patterns you reach for most often and why? I don't know if there's patterns I reach for all the time, so much as like a way of writing code in general, sort of like coding practices. There's refactorings that I reach for all the time. I think extract method is kind of one of these like amazing balms that fixes so many code problems. It's shocking to me how often people don't extract enough methods, in my opinion. Almost all of my methods are one line. And it makes it so that I can sort of examine the pieces easily. So extract method is kind of like my go-to hammer generally. Like until like all my methods are really clear and really small and work with small pieces, I keep doing that. And then now like we have this pile of methods. Okay, can we extract these entities into a class? Do some of these methods have cohesion? Are some of these methods all taking the same argument? Maybe they just want that argument as instance data and they should be their own class. As far as design patterns, I use the active record pattern all the time, right? Beyond that, I'm a fan of null object pretty often. That's one of those things that I think is like somewhat lesser known, but it can cause a lot of nice things to happen to your code. So if you don't know what the null object pattern is, that's worth going and reading about. Lets you sort of nuke conditionals, which I'm a fan of. Another is like replace polymorphism or replace conditional with polymorphism. So rather than asking an object questions about itself and determining what to do, you sort of just send these messages to different objects of different classes and let them figure out what to do for themselves. Neither of those are really patterns, but I guess null object is a pattern. There are probably names for things that I'm doing that are in fact patterns, but I don't know them. What books are you reading right now? I am reading a book. I've been reading small pieces of SICP, the Structure and Interpretation of Computer Programs. I sort of always pick it up and put it down, and pick it up and put it down. That's a great book, by the way. It's like kind of a classic in computer science. Really enjoy that. I've been reading the book that I recommended earlier, How to Design Programs, which is a really excellent book. I'm digging that a lot. Both of those available for free online. How can you beat that? Cool. Anything else? That might be it right now. Can't think of the others. There's one I can sort of picture the cover. It's on my book, my bedside table, but can't picture what it is. Sorry. Is this session being recorded? Will we be able to view it down the track? Yes and yes. Assuming, I mean, we're gonna have to edit out some of that audio stuff, but we'll just cut out the stuff that was crappy and the stuff that was good. So there should be a recording of this available soon. I'm spearheading my local Ruby meetup. I live in an area that's mostly Java/.NET. Any suggestions for hosting engaging meetups? Suggestions for hosting engaging meetups. Every meetup seems to be the same to me, more or less. That they have one or two speakers, they thank the sponsors, people go out for beers often. Actually, I've seen, you know what I've seen that was great, that I really liked was I spoke at the PDX Ruby, Portland's Ruby meetup, and they had a section towards the beginning where someone stood up and presented a problem. And he said, you know, here's a little code challenge. That's the kind of thing you can solve in one method. You know, write a method that takes this and returns this, kind of just like a little brain teaser kind of thing. And he had people get into groups and compete for the shortest character count. So it wasn't like, you know, write beautiful code. It was like literally like get down, like how many characters can you do this in? And that was really fun. And it got people talking. It encourages socialization. And some people learn things, right? Like you learn new methods, you learn, again, it's like pairing basically on the fly. So maybe something like that would be worth doing. I think struggle to, I would challenge you to make something that's more engaging than the standard meetup. Like go to like you're probably familiar with what a standard meetup is. See if you can do better. And you can probably do better by just changing things, right? Like just push people a little bit out of their comfort zone, have them try to like make them learn more. I guess that might be the key to it, right? Is like assume that your job is to make sure everyone walks out the door a better programmer in some way. Given that, how do you want to design your meetup? Figure that out, and I think you will have an awesome meetup. Oh, this is a great question. What is your opinion on the importance or relevance of a college degree for a career in web development? How important is it for prospective employees or apprentices at thoughtbot? I think it is not important for a career in web development. It is not important to us at thoughtbot for employees or apprentices. I do not have a degree in web development. I studied computer science for a long time, did not graduate, and the stuff I learned I don't think was super valuable for what I'm doing now, and I wouldn't, we don't look for degrees at all at thoughtbot. I didn't even submit a resume to thoughtbot, but even if I had, I wouldn't have put that work on there, I believe. It's kind of all about what you can do. So if I had a friend who was trying to get into web development, I would tell them, ideally, go to a boot camp / school, like go to the Turing School in Denver. They are great if you can make that work. If you can like spend the 7 months full time, that's great. If you can't, there are some online versions. Tea Leaf Academy is a really good one. Takes you from basically no programming experience to like a decent level, and it's online and it's sort of go at your own pace. Those are great. Once you've gone through that, join Upcase, obviously. And then, but yeah, it's not about college. I mean, college is great. Like if your job is to get the career, if your goal is a career, do those things. If your goal is, you know, an awesome, formative, interesting, fun experience, like college still has a lot of things to offer. I'm not saying I wouldn't tell anyone to go to college, but if you're like trying to switch jobs, for example, like you have some other job and you want to become a web developer, college is not the way to go, in my opinion. This is interesting. Can you give us some general ideas about Node.js Express maybe versus Ruby on Rails? Ruby on Rails for life, down with Node.js. I don't know. I'm sort of not a huge JavaScript person. Don't have a lot of experience using Node.js. I think the thing to do is I'm gonna try to get someone with a lot more JavaScript experience to sit next to me for the next one of these and throw all the JavaScript questions to them. This is interesting. Do you SSH over HTTP? If not on DigitalOcean, perhaps another ocean? What? Do I SSH over HTTP? I don't think so. I'm not sure. I use whatever GitHub's default is, for example, like for pushing and pulling repos. I remember they switched from like one to the other. I don't remember which one is default now. So not a ton of experience there. Not sure what to say on that one. It's weird how this was before was sorting these, but not anymore. Maybe it's sorted by a weird algorithm. Why were you willing to teach at the Turing School but not at Metis? I was willing to teach at Metis. I just didn't work out schedule-wise, unfortunately. Turing School, I happened to take a sabbatical and was able to go down to Turing School. But while Metis was happening, I was otherwise predisposed, unfortunately. Okay. Tom Rage, at what point in your career did you experience the greatest growth? What factors assisted this? Personal behaviors, mentors, etc. The biggest growth in, I had a period, so the first, it started when I got my first Ruby on Rails job. I was working at a medical software company, writing this like terrible proprietary language, and was like super sad about it and really didn't like that job, but like worked on enough Ruby on my own to get hired at this place, Dana-Farber, which is a cancer hospital in Boston, and worked in a really small team. There was two other developers, and I worked very closely with the sort of lead developer and paired with him a lot. And that was really when my like level took off. And that sort of lasted about a year. And that sort of got me from like up until like sort of like high intermediate, I would say. And then I sort of like plateaued. I sort of reached the level of the other programmers in the team. And so I kind of got bored. And so I just went to go work at thoughtbot because I really didn't want to get stuck there. And that actually was probably even made the graph probably even steeper of my sort of learning over time, because I went from being basically sort of tied for the most capable programmer on the team to sort of being in probably the bottom decile, right? Like it was like everyone was better than I was, which is exactly where I wanted to be. And so like I just had to get better and did get better and absorbed a ton of information. Helped. It's just being around more experienced coworkers is just kind of irreplaceable, I think. So it's been every time I've changed jobs to work with people that are more experienced has been the answer. That's when I experienced the greatest growth. Personal behaviors. One personal behavior contributed a lot, which was I decided to get over that idea of I decided to agree admit when I didn't understand something. Just to sort of, if someone explains something I didn't get it, I'm like, no, sorry, I didn't get that. Can you try another way? And just sort of get over that embarrassment of like, I really should know this, and try to ignore that voice in my head. Man, talking continuously is tiring on the voice. But I will do it for you because I love you. We still have 26 people here. And if you're going to sit here and listen to me, then I will try to help you as best I can. Next question. What's your role these days at thoughtbot? What's a normal day look like for you, if there is such a thing? I like this question. My role is, my title is Managing Director of Upcase. So the person in charge of Upcase, basically. So I guess that it's sort of the closest normal title to that is sort of I guess product manager, I guess is probably the right way to think of it. I basically am responsible for Upcase as a business. I decide what the priorities are for what we're going to work on. I help manage the developers and designers on the team. I help record the weekly iteration and sort of set strategic direction as well. So I like to like go into a conference room and grab a whiteboard for a couple hours and just like draw things and think deep thoughts and try to like what needs to happen next. And that's kind of my thing. Normal day, I do like one-on-ones once a week with the people that report to me, or at least when I have people that report to me, like which has been sort of moving around, shuffling because I just took a sabbatical. A given week sort of is a mix of programming myself. I'll write some code, reviewing pull requests, managing our Trello board of like what we're going to do next, and have a sort of like deep thought conversations, and also talking to like Chad, our CEO, about like how the business is going, like looking at the revenue numbers and talking about how things are shaping up. Have you personally found ways to use your programming skills for the good of the community? Community here being more so groups or individuals who could use the products or know-how of programming, and less so the open source world. So have I found a way to use my programming skills for the good of the non-technical world? No, not really. I mean, Upcase in a way helps people, but those are technical people, right? Like we're trying to make better developers. This is actually something that I'm kind of hoping to change about myself soonish, the next couple of years. Is I think the work I'm doing is helpful to a group of people, But I think as a developer, I have a lot of leverage. And as someone that lives in a developed country, I have an opportunity to help potentially many thousands of people simultaneously with work I could do. And so I'm conscious of that opportunity, and I want to do something about it. If I were going to die in a couple of years, would I feel like I had spent these last few years on the best thing possible for the world? I would answer no to that right now, and I'd like to answer yes to that. So that's something that I'm keeping in mind and trying to work on, trying to be better about. You've often talked about your belief in habits. What are the best habits for becoming a better developer, including tool sharpening? I'm a huge believer in habits. What are the best habits for becoming a better developer? Go to work every day with people that are smarter than you are. That's the best habit. Next best habit is be hungry, I guess. Like cultivate a desire to learn if you don't already have it. What are specific habits? The tool sharpening is a big one. That helped a ton. What are my other habits? I'm not sure exactly, but keep thinking about it. That's a great way to think about it. Like, what are the habits that you build that are going to get you where you want to go? Kent Beck, who we saw a quote from earlier, has another great quote, which is he considers himself a mediocre programmer with excellent habits. And I think there's a lot of truth. I think there's a lot of power in that. If Kent Beck thinks it's the habits that made him awesome, I think there's probably something to that. So keep thinking about that question, Tom, and develop your own habits and be awesome. I like this question. Do you use a lot of Linux commands? Yeah, I do. I do a lot of my work from the terminal. I'm a very huge fan of using the terminal whenever possible. I'm not a huge fan of the mouse and the GUI generally. I spend 85% of my day in Vim or the terminal. And then probably the remainder is in the browser. But even in the browser, I end up using like Vimium, which is a Chrome plugin that makes Chrome more like Vim. So learn those commands. Oh man, this is a good one. Paperclip or carrier wave? See, this is great. This is a great question because I have a conflict of interest, of course, right? So thoughtbot wrote Paperclip. I've used carrier wave on a recent project. It was great. Paperclip has been around a long time. It has a lot of technical debt in it. At least it did. I mean, last time I looked at it / talked about it with other coworkers. So maybe that carrier wave is a better solution now. That's fine. I'm okay. I can say that. I can say that to you. I would ask. Yeah, I guess I'd ask around. I tried carrier wave and liked it a lot. Maybe it's great. Maybe it's better. Yeah, I guess count the stars on GitHub and see who has more, and then use that one. But attachments aren't like rocket science, right? It's like you can probably use either and it'll probably just work, right? Similar question. What are the most important thoughtbot open source projects? What are the most important? I guess it depends on what you mean by important. Like most popular, Factory Girl is probably the most popular. I think it's, last time I checked, it had something like 3 million downloads. It's just useful. And like I don't think I've ever worked on an app where I was like, oh, I wish we were using Factory Girl. It's just like a great tool. Important. I think they're all important, I guess. They're all important because they sort of have led to roundabout success for us. Like thoughtbot has always invested in open source, and I think that has benefited us as a consultancy. In that, both because we get to use these tools, we get to reuse the work we've done and the decisions we've made, but also because it has sort of raised our standing in the community. I think up until a couple of years ago, most people learned about us through our open source gems. Now I think there are other avenues where they learn about us, like through podcasts, and our blog are both fairly popular now. So those are other good sort of channels for us. But I think that all the open source projects are fairly important just in terms of legitimacy, I guess, in the community and giving back. Like it's something that we can do for the community that has helped us a ton and has given us a lot of great open source. So they're all important. I love my children equally. Regarding spearheading a Ruby meetup, talks about personal experiences and problems and solutions are always much more engaging than straight up tutorials. I think this is worthy of further discussion on the forums. I agree. I have a lot to say about what makes a good talk in particular. So if you want to start a thread, I will chime in. and express my strong opinions. What is the advantage of using Z shell over bash in the terminal? People have strong opinions about this, but I think they're fairly similar. I think most of the things you can do in Z shell you can do in bash. There are some niceties. Like I think Z shell has a slightly better autocomplete or like tab completion options in it, and there are some sort of I guess I don't know. I don't think I use anything in Z shell that is like you couldn't do in bash. So to me, there's not really that much of an advantage other than so many other people are using it that I can get good advice when I need it. And my environment is similar to my coworkers, which is often nice. What do I think of the movie Risky Business? I have not seen Risky Business. Okay. What do I feel is my greatest achievement as a developer? My greatest achievement as a developer. I don't know. I don't know if I could point to any one thing and be like, there it was. That was my best thing. And I hope that kind of remains true. Like, I hope I'm always kind of just doing a lot of things. Maybe this is just some imposter syndrome and I'm like discounting my own successes, but nothing like stands out as being like, wow, that was just amazing. I think my success that has sort of been a result of like a lot of sort of smaller things. I guess one of my favorite things to point at is my maze generator and solver in ClojureScript that I wrote with Chris Hunt. That was super fun. You can find that if you Google like codecation. We take these things called codecations. We're going to write code on vacation. That's probably, that's my greatest achievement is how pretty that maze generator and solver is. It's fun. What about Xvim for Xcode? I assume that's a plugin for Xcode that lets you use Vim-like things. That sounds great. You should use it. I assume. I have no Xcode experience. That'd be a good question on the forum again, because we do have iOS developers in-house, and they are Vim fans. So I'm sure if that's a thing, I bet they are aware of it. I'm gonna try to see if I can improve my lighting slightly here, because the sun is going down, giving me slightly less beautiful light. Oh, it's kind of nice. Maybe. Let's see. Okay. I gotta get somebody in here that can answer these questions. What DevOps related tools do you and thoughtbot prefer to use when an application outgrows Heroku? What do you use for deployment or stack creation? We use Heroku all day long. So don't know. Good forum question. Wish I could help you. Huh. This is a fun question. Can you show us your office? Yeah, screw it. I'm gonna walk the laptop downstairs and show the office. This is an interesting idea. All right. So let's spin around here. I am in our training room, broadcasting at you. And we're gonna do this real quick and get back to it and then wrap it up. But I'll point you this way. This is a live demo of the thoughtbot office. I hope I don't drop this laptop. All right, here we go. Kitchen upstairs. You're on the second floor right now. I'm gonna walk you downstairs and I'm gonna be quiet because people are working. So I'll show you around. Here's your virtual tour. This is Chad. This is my boss. Be nice to him. That's your virtual tour of the office. Oh man, it's an Inception moment. Super delayed. Oh, it is delayed. Well, we're gonna get some Inception going on in a second here. All right. You get the gist. Hope you enjoyed the tour. I'm sure it was very shaky. Sorry about that. But that was a funny idea. Thanks, Victor. Okay. Sean asks, does thoughtbot's bin setup pattern include the installation of native dependencies required for an application, e.g. ImageMagick? If not, do you guys use tools like Vagrant or Docker to keep everyone's development environment exactly the same? That's a good question. I don't think bin setup installs ImageMagick generally. So by the way, our bin setup pattern is all of our apps that we work on have a script, a setup script that gets the app installed, basically gets everything that you need configured. Things that are native like ImageMagick, there's probably a few of these that we don't explicitly include in the bin setup script. Maybe we should, but no, we generally do not use Vagrant or Docker to keep everyone's development environment the same. I don't think we've had a lot of pain around this. Most of what our apps require are not native dependencies like that. They tend to just mostly be gems, and so, or gems that install their own native dependencies, I suppose. So it hasn't been something that Vagrant and Docker has not been something we've reached for, generally. Oh, Frank, this is a good question. How do you feel about all of the discussion about open office plans? I'm not a fan of open offices, personally. I would prefer to have an office at the door. I'm very noise sensitive and easily distracted visually as well. So like when people are having conversations or moving around, or it distracts the heck out of me. So not a huge fan. Wish I had an office, wish I had a door. But you know, I make it work. I put in earplugs when I'm working. Helps a lot. Robert says, thoughtbot has the quietest office ever. It was really quiet down there. It's often a little bit noisier, but again, it's the open plan, so we all try to be like respectful of each other. So people were kind of heads down working. Interesting question. What are some values you look for in a company? What constitutes a good company culture? I'm very sensitive to bureaucracy, or it's sort of the opposite. Or I'm sensitive to companies that don't seem to trust their employees. Places where the emphasis is on like assuming people are going to do what's the wrong thing. I really cannot stand that. So I think one of my favorite things about thoughtbot is like you show up and they're like, welcome to thoughtbot, here's your credit card. And the guidelines for the credit card are like, if you use your judgment, buy things that you think you need. You want a book, just buy the book. Like you don't need to like fill out a form. You don't need to expense it. And I just love that. That's part of it. Another key thing to culture is a group of people that care, that passion that I talked about before. Even one person on a team that really just is not motivated, is not passionate, is just kind of mailing it in, is going to just crush team morale, is going to bring down everybody substantially. And so having a culture where it would just be sort of acceptable to bring in someone like that, I think is really huge. That to me is good company culture. Is really quality people to work with, people that care and are always trying to get better and don't just do things the same way they did last time just because, laziness. Oh man, you asked me to rant here. What do you think? How do I feel about Minitest versus RSpec? I'm not a big fan of Minitest. I like RSpec a lot, but at the end of the day, this is such a bike shed argument in my opinion. Like they both do the same thing more or less. I find RSpec's features to be a little bit nicer. So use whatever if you have a strong preference for one or the other, use that. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But for me, I'll keep reaching for RSpec because I like it. Are there any great Ruby plugins for Vim autocomplete especially? I don't know of any like Ruby specific autocomplete plugins for Vim. You can see all my plugins on my dot files on GitHub. I have a decent amount. I love Rails Vim. I like Surround.Vim. I like Unimpaired. But I have a bunch. You can just check them out and steal from my dot files liberally. Do I or anyone at thoughtbot have interest in web VR development? We have a developer in Boston named Matt Monjo, and he almost certainly is interested in that. So if you want to talk to him about that, I bet he would like to engage with your personal brand on Twitter or something. Any tentative plans for a thoughtbot Chicago branch? I don't believe I'm at liberty to answer that question. Shouldn't have even opened it. Who knows? There may be a thoughtbot Chicago. It could certainly happen. I wouldn't shock me. Okay. Stu asks, is Upcase open source? I had issues a while ago when I tried to get the source following links from the app. That's weird. It's not open source in that anyone from the world can see it. It's open to subscribers of Upcase. So if you are subscribed, I actually don't know if you are or not. I think you are, maybe through Level Up. Then you can access it, but it's not open source to the whole world. But for only $29 a month, you can come look at our code. It's a bargain. Tom asks, any chance you look at Emacs with evil mode, or are you just too invested in Vim at this point? Bonus points, at least it comes with Tetris. Yes, that's important for an editor to come with Tetris. I think I'm too invested in Vim. Evil mode is sort of that uncanny valley for me. Like, I've used evil mode in the past. It's like pretty close to Vim, or Vim is so huge that at most you can implement like 20% of Vim, right, reasonably. And everyone uses a slightly different 20%. Everyone uses the same 10%, but that next 10% is always kind of like all over the place. I think I'm just too invested in Vim. I love Emacs's, the fact it's written in Lisp. I love its extensibility. There are a lot of great things about Emacs. But yeah, nothing compares to Vim for editing speed for me. And that's what, at the end of the day, is important, is efficiency. Okay, I think we'll stop there. It's 4:30. We did 90 minutes. My voice is a little tired. Sorry about those audio issues earlier. I hope this was useful. It looks like the response was pretty good. We still got 19 people kicking around, so that's cool. We're going to edit this a little bit and get this out to you. And we'll do this again. Let me know in the forum what you thought of this, or shoot me an email if you want, Ben@thoughtbot. You could always email me feedback about Upcase, ideas, complaints, whatever. I'm always available. But let me know on the forum thread where I announced this what we could do to make this better next time, if you have any feedback about this in particular. And I hope to hear from you all soon, and have a great weekend, and good luck.